Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison Lagrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. At least 6 killed and over a dozen injured in a shooting in Jerusalem. Israeli police say 2 terrorists neutralized as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits the site. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to convene a virtual BRICS meeting as the US tariff war escalates. India to be represented by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto sacks his finance minister after days of violent protest against his government over perks allotted to the parliamentarians. The Philippine Senate elects Vicente Soto III as its new leader, weeks after Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment was shelved amid uproar over a flood control graft probe. And an Australian woman convicted of poisoning 3 lunch guests with deadly mushrooms gets life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest from South Asia. The Himalayan kingdom of Nepal is witnessing a massive showdown over a social media ban by the government. What began as an online movement over the weekend and now spilled onto the streets, violence erupted in the capital of Kathmandu as thousands of Nepalese youth protested and clashed with police. Protesters, mostly Gen Z, pelted stones and sticks, broke through police barricades and made their way through to Parliament. The protesters vandalized the Parliament gate, breaking its windows and setting the entrance compound on fire.
We are the movement. We are the movement.
Waving national flags, Gen Z protesters began the march with the national anthem and then resorted to chants against the government's ban on social media, rampant corruption in the country and what they call an authoritarian rule. At least 10 people have been reported dead and at least 42 have been injured. And reports say as the clashes escalated, police used water cannons, smoke bombs, tear gas and opened fire at multiple locations, prompting authorities to impose a curfew and to deploy the army in the capital of Kathmandu. The protesters are demanding that the government lift its ban on social media platform and to end corruption. Now, more than 20 social media sites, including Facebook, YouTube, X, Snapchat, Reddit and Pinterest, have been inaccessible in Nepal since Friday. This after the government blocked 26 unregistered platforms, accusing them of failing to comply with regulations, leaving users upset. The government's plan also drew criticism from human rights and press freedom groups, many of whom accuse the government of impeding freedom of speech and causing harm to businesses. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli has defended the move, saying that his government is not against social media, but the platforms must first comply with the country's laws. The Prime Minister claimed that the sites banned failed to register, pay taxes and be accountable. The government says it had given the companies 7 days to register following a court order, but all had failed to meet the deadline. Only 5 companies, including TikTok, complied with the order and were not restricted. Over the weekend, while the ban had been in effect, several videos contrasting the struggles of ordinary Nepali people with the children of politicians flaunting luxury goods and vacations went viral on TikTok, which is still operating in the country. The near-blanket ban triggered chaos right after it came into effect, hitting businesses and Nepal's crucial tourism industry, which relies heavily on social media. Large numbers of Nepalese also use these social media and messaging apps for communicating with family members living abroad. While Nepal has remained a largely unrestricted country for freedom of expression, critics say a growing overreach by the Ali government has caused concern. In recent months, the government has been restricting access to popular online platforms. In July, it blocked the Telegram messaging app, citing concerns over increasing online fraud and money laundering. In August last year, the government lifted a 9-month ban on TikTok after the platform agreed to adhere to Nepali regulations. Not just this, a series of draft bills governing press freedom and social media are under debate in Nepal's parliament that could see people fined or jailed for content deemed against national interest. Some of them could also allow the government to shut down newspapers and to revoke licenses of journalists. But the anger among the people has reached boiling point. Conflict, chaos and clashes are back on Kathmandu's streets. Will the Ali government bow down to the Gen Z fighting for freedom of speech and expression? Or will they crack down the silence and criticism? And moving on to our next story, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has backed US President Donald Trump's tariffs on countries sharing trade ties with Russia. Now, calling Trump's tariffs against Russian trade partners the right idea, Zelensky hit out against Moscow's energy trade amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. In an interview, Zelensky was asked about the recent meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the SCO summit and whether the US tariffs on India are backfiring. Zelensky said, and I quote, "I think the idea to put tariffs on countries who continue to make deals with Russia is the right idea," unquote. Now, US President Trump has specifically targeted India for its oil deals with Moscow, doubling tariffs on most Indian goods to 50%. This includes an extra 25% duty on India's purchases of Russian crude. New Delhi called the tariffs unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable, arguing that its oil imports from various sources, including from Russia, are meant to meet domestic demand. At the same time, India and the US remain locked in negotiations to strike a trade deal, with New Delhi reiterating that its national interests will come first. Zelensky's remarks in support of US tariffs came just hours after Moscow unleashed more than 800 drones inside Ukraine. Zelensky said that leaders, states and institutions closer to Russia must face consequences, including tougher sanctions and stronger tariffs.
It is important that today there is a broad reaction from partners to this strike. Obviously, Russia is trying to hurt Ukraine, and the strikes are more sudden. This is a clear sign that Putin is testing the world, whether they will accept it or put up with it. Therefore, it is important that the statements of leaders, states, and institutions are followed up by strong actions, sanctions against Russia, against individuals associated with Russia, and strong tariffs and other restrictions on trade with Russia.
As Zelensky calls for more sanctions against Russia's trade partners, US President Donald Trump once again claimed that he will get Ukraine war settled soon. Asked if he plans to speak to the Russian President Putin next, Trump said that he will speak to the Kremlin leader very soon.
Do you plan to speak to President Putin next? And what
Very soon, over the next couple of days. Look, we're going to get it done. The Russia-Ukraine situation, we're going to get it done. I have confidence we're going to get it done.
With Zelensky backing Trump's tariffs, countries bearing these levies find themselves in the spotlight. How this plays out in the coming weeks remains to be seen. And shifting focus to US President Donald Trump's crackdown on immigration. In the latest, Washington has announced new rules for non-immigrant visas. These visas cover the categories under which most Indians travel to America for tourism, business, and family visits. Under the new rules, applicants must now appear for their visa interviews only in their country of citizenship or legal residence. This means Indians needing to travel to the US at short notice will no longer be able to book a B1 business visa or a B2 tourist visa appointment in a third country. The change is effective immediately and ends the practice of applying from a third country for faster interview dates. That practice became common during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the US visa interview wait times in India stretched to nearly 3 years. At the time, many applicants flew to the US consulates in nearby countries like Singapore and Thailand to cut the wait. Reports citing travel agents say that the US consulate in Frankfurt had even created dedicated appointment slots for Indian applicants, where the waiting period here had ballooned to 15 to 20 months. But under the new rules, that option no longer exists. Indians applying for short-term business or tourist visas, that is under the B1 and B2 categories, must now schedule interviews in India itself and face the waiting times. According to the US State Department, current wait times for B1 and B2 interviews are 3.5 months in Hyderabad and Mumbai, 4.5 months in New Delhi, 5 months in Kolkata, and 9 months in Chennai. There are exceptions for citizens of countries where the US does not conduct regular visa operations. For example, Russians can apply in Astana or Warsaw, Afghans in Islamabad, and Iranians in Dubai. This is the latest in a string of tightening measures under Trump's second presidency. Just last week, the State Department announced that nearly all non-immigrant visa applicants will require an in-person interview with a consular officer. That includes children under 14 and adults over 79. As the Trump administration shuts the door on applying for short-term visas from third countries, Indians will now need to plan their US travel far more carefully. With waiting times already stretching across several months, the new rules could mean longer delays and a heavier burden on the non-immigrant US visa applicants. And shifting focus now to West Asia, where Israel's plan of annexing the West Bank is putting the Abraham Accords in jeopardy. In the latest, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has reportedly said that Israel's annexation of the West Bank would end any chance of normalization of ties between the two sides. Israeli public broadcaster Khan News has reported that the decision came during a meeting between the Saudi Crown Prince and the UAE President last week in Riyadh. Reports say both Saudis' Mohammed bin Salman and the UAE's Mohammed bin Zayed agreed that a pullback from the Abraham Accords would be a realistic option if Israel makes moves toward the annexation of the West Bank. Now, earlier, the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed had warned Israel, calling its plans a red flag. Saudi Arabian officials also reportedly said that by taking such a step, Israel would be playing into the hands of Iran and Hamas, whose interest is to block ties between Israel and the Arab states. The UAE agreed to normalize ties with Israel in 2020 in exchange for Israel shelving plans to annex parts of the West Bank, in a move widely seen as having tacit backing from Riyadh. Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan are also signatories to the accords, which were signed during the first term of the Trump administration. Now, reports say warning from Riyadh and Abu Dhabi have alarmed the Israeli Benjamin Netanyahu's administration for now. The Israeli cabinet purportedly took West Bank annexation off the agenda for a meeting last week. The Netanyahu administration had been weighing annexation of parts of the West Bank in a retort to a wave of Palestinian statehood recognition by the West. Now, last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu discussed annexation of parts of the West Bank, but the Israeli Security Cabinet is yet to discuss it in detail, and no decision has been made yet. Israeli officials reportedly said that Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering various scales and levels of annexation options. They range from a limited takeover of several Jewish settlements to a broader approach calling for 60% of the territory.
The time has come to apply Israeli sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, to once and for all remove from the agenda the idea of dividing our tiny land and establishing a terror state in its center. We have no desire to apply our sovereignty on population that wants to destroy us. Enemies should be fought against, not allowed a comfortable life. That is why the chief principle for applying sovereignty, get it well into your heads. This is the slogan, maximum territory, minimum population.
Israel captured the West Bank from Jordan in the 1967 war. Then, in defiance of international law, Israel began establishing Jewish settlements there. The Palestinians want the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip for a future state, a position supported by most of the international community. Meanwhile, the UK, France, Australia, Canada, Portugal, Belgium have announced plans to recognize Palestinian statehood at the United Nations General Assembly this month, joining more than 140 nations that already do so. That would be 3/4 of the UN members. So, the Israel-Hamas war and the recognition of a Palestinian statehood are expected to bring fireworks to the United Nations General Assembly, which convenes in just 14 days from now. But will it be able to bring peace to Gaza? That remains to be seen. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30